What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? It's Daniel and welcome back to our video. Today I'll be taking a look at the 2025 Daytona 500 entry list. I'll talk about the teams that have been confirmed for the Daytona 500 and talk about the teams that could potentially show up at this year's Daytona 500. So anyways, let's go ahead and just jump straight into it. We're going to start by talking about the one car for Trackhouse Racing. This course once again be driven by Ross Chastain. Ross Chastain's a really solid super speed racer, will be looking to win his first Daytona 500 ever. He'll be looking to also pick up his first win of the 2025 season at this year's Daytona 500, which I think he's got a really good chance and opportunity. Trackhouse have shown some really good speed at super speedways, and I expect Ross Chastain to have a good chance and opportunity to win his first ever Daytona 500. Up next, how about the two car for Team Penske? This will once again be driven by Austin Cindric. Austin Cindric will be looking to win his second Daytona 500 after, of course, he won it a couple years ago in 2022. Cindric is a really good super speed racer. One type of track he was really good at in 2024 was super speedways, and I expect Cindric to be a major threat and serious contender to go to victory lane. He'll be looking to win his third career NASCAR Cup Series victory, and I think he's got a good chance and opportunity to do it in the Daytona 500. Up next, how about the three car for Richard Childress Racing? This will once again be driven by Austin Dillon. Austin Dillon will be looking to win his second Daytona 500 in 2025, as of course he won the Daytona 500 in controversial fashion after dumping Eric Almirola on the final lap in 2018. Austin's a solid super speed racer. He's probably going to qualify up front in the second half of the field. We'll see if he can survive all the carnage and wrecks, but he looks to win his second Daytona 500 in the 2025 year. Up next, how about the four car for Spire Motorsports? Yes, while the number has not been officially confirmed for Noah Gragson for 2025, there's been speculation that Noah Gragson is going to drive the number 4 car for Front Row next year, move away from the 38 to move to the number 4. Noah Gragson, we already know, is going to Front Row. He's a solid super speed racer, and Front Row, we know, qualifies up front. I could see Noah Gragson potentially winning the pole or qualifying up front with Front Row. He'll be looking to win his first career NASCAR Cup Series event in the Daytona 500. Up next, how about the 5 car for Hendrick Motorsports? This will once again be driven by Kyle Larson. Kyle Larson is looking to win his first Daytona 500, which will be the last of the 4 Crown Jewel events that he needs to complete to become one of, I think, only 9 or 10 drivers who've ever won all 4 Crown Jewel events. Kyle Larson has been actually solid in the Daytona 500, so I think he's got a really good chance and opportunity to get it done. I think a top 10 is definitely possible, but I could see him being a major factor to win the Daytona 500 in 2025. Up next, up with the 6 car for RFK Racing. This will once again be driven by Brad Keselowski. Brad Keselowski has come up close so many times to picking up that first Daytona 500 win, but he's been very fast the last couple of years and came very close to winning it in 2023. I expect Brad to be a major factor and contender for the win. I think with how good he's been at super speedways, I think Brad will be a major factor and serious contender to get it done. I expect the 16 to be strong, and I think Brad will be a factor for sure in this year's Daytona 500 in 2025. Up next, out the 7 car for Spire Motorsports. This will once again be driven by Justin Haley, who officially joins the team full-time in 2025, with Rodney Childers being the crew chief. Justin Haley is a very underrated super speedway racer, generally runs really good at these types of tracks. I don't think he's going to qualify very well because Spire Motorsports does not qualify that well on these types of tracks, but Spire's looking to get their stuff upgraded. They're looking to be a lot stronger, and I certainly do think that Justin Haley will be a factor for sure at the end of the race in 2025. Up next, how about the 8 car for Richard Childress Racing? This will once again be driven by Kyle Busch. Kyle Busch, in what will be his 20th attempt at the race, well, technically his 21st, but the 20th time he's raced in the event, will be looking to win his first ever Daytona 500. He came very close to winning it in 2023 and also in 2024. And I think there's a really good chance that Kyle Busch can get it done this year. If not, I think he's going to minimum finish inside the top 5 because Kyle Busch, like I said, has been really strong as super speedways in the next-gen era, and especially at RCR. I think is going to be a major factor for sure in the 2025 Daytona 500. Up next, up with the 9 car for Hendrick Motorsports. This will once again be driven by Chase Elliott. Chase Elliott's been one of the better super speed racers over the course of the last couple of years, and Chase is someone who's come very close to winning the Daytona 500, just came up short in 2021, and also won a stage, of course, in 2024. I think Chase is going to have a really good chance and opportunity to look to get Hendrick their second straight Daytona 500 win. I think he will be a major factor and serious contender to win the 2025 Daytona 500. Up next, how about the 10 car for Kaulig Racing? This will be renumbered from the number 31 car from 2024, and Ty Dillon will be the driver who will attempt to run his first Daytona 500, I believe, since 2021 when he drove for the Gaunt brothers. Ty Dillon, of course, will join full-time in the program and looks to run really well in 2025, but I don't expect him to be a major factor and contender. Kaulig's shown some good speed at super speedways, but I don't think that Ty Dillon will be a factor in the Daytona 500. Up next, how about the 11 car for Joe Gibbs Racing? This will once again be driven by Denny Hamlin. However, Denny Hamlin will have a new crew chief in this year's Daytona 500 with Chris Gill joined up for the year. He's also looking to win his fourth ever Daytona 500, looking to become only the third driver in Cup history to have 4 Daytona 500 victories, the other 2 being Cale Yarborough and Richard Petty. Denny's going to be a factor, but he hasn't been as good as super speedways in the next-gen era, but I do think he'll be a factor for the Daytona 500 win and victory. Up next, how about the 12th car for Team Penske? This will once again be driven by Ryan Blaney. Ryan Blaney is going into this year's Daytona 500 as one of the favorites. He's a really strong super speed racer, has won a Daytona once, and also has won a Talladega 3 or 4 times. If he could just stay out of trouble and stay out of the carnage, I think he potentially could get his first ever Daytona 500 win. He's looking also for a second Cup championship in the last 3 years. Ryan Blaney will definitely be a major factor and contender in the 2025 Daytona 500. Up next, how about the 13 car for Kaulig Racing? I think there's definitely a chance that Kaulig Racing could enter a third car in 2025. Who could be candidates for this car? Maybe Christian Eckes, maybe Daniel Dye, maybe Corey LaJoie if he doesn't end up going full-time with Rick Ware next year. Those could certainly be possibilities, but I do think there's a really good chance that you might see Kaulig Racing enter Daytona 500 with the third car next year. Up next, how about the 15 car for Rick Ware Racing? Now, this car will be most likely an unchartered car, as this charter will be going to RFK Racing in 2025. The potential candidates I see getting behind the wheel are Sheldon Creed, Corey LaJoie, Sam Mayer, Cody Ware, and Harrison Burton. If I had to put a favorite down, I would say probably Cody Ware at this point, but I think Sheldon Creed potentially making his Cup debut would not be a bad move. Not Haley Deegan, obviously, but I could definitely see one of these drivers getting the seat at some point for the 500. Up next, how about the 16 car for Kaulig Racing? This will once again be driven by AJ Allmendinger, who I think will be competing as like a 15th Daytona 500 at this point. AJ is an underrated super speed racer. He's won a couple super speedways in the NASCAR Xfinity Series and has been solid on the Cup side of things as well. I think he will be a factor for sure if he can stay out of the carnage in trouble. I think a lot of guys could definitely get it done, but I think if AJ can stay out of the trouble and carnage throughout the event, I think he will have a good chance and opportunity to compete for the win in the 2025 Daytona 500. Up next, how about the 17 car for RFK Racing? This will once again be driven by Chris Buescher. Chris Buescher has been really strong with super speedways over the course of the last couple of seasons. Of course, he won a Daytona in the summer race in 2023, and Chris Buescher also has come close to win the Daytona 500 in 2023 as well. I do believe that Chris Buescher will be a major factor for the win if he can stay out of trouble. I think he's going to be a major contender for the victory, and I think that RFK will bring the pace and speed in the Daytona 500 this year. Up next, how about the 19 car for Joe Gibbs Racing? There's a new driver behind the wheel in 2025, and that is Chase Briscoe. Chase Briscoe has been okay at super speedways. He's qualified very well, but I do not expect him to qualify that strong in the Daytona 500. But I do believe that Chase Briscoe will, if he can survive, may have a decent chance for top 10 or top 15. He's looking for his first ever Daytona 500. I do think he's got an outside chance and opportunity to maybe get it done. Up next, how about the 20 car for Joe Gibbs Racing? This will once again be driven by Christopher Bell. Christopher Bell is looking for his first ever Cup championship and also looking for his first Daytona 500 win. And Christopher Bell has become a much better driver at super speedways over the last year or so. I used to think he wasn't good at these types of tracks. He's changed my mind on that front because he has definitely improved and gotten a lot better as a driver. Do I think he's a favorite to win? No, but I think a top 10 is certainly possible. And if he can survive all the carnage and the wrecks, I think he will be a factor for sure at the end of the 2025 Daytona 500 this year. Up next, how about the 21 car for the Wood brothers? There's a new driver behind the wheel of the number 21 cars. Harrison Burton will not be behind the wheel of this car in 2025. Instead, it is going to be Josh Berry. Now, Josh Berry, I think, will qualify pretty well and has shown some pace on super speedways, and the Wood brothers, of course, won the last time they were here at Daytona in the summer race. I think that Josh Berry could be an underdog for this event. I'm being serious. Yes, he's a guy who's good at short tracks, but the Wood Brothers get a lot of support from Team Penske, which I think will help Josh Berry in a pretty big way. I think he'll show some good pace and speed, and I think a top 10 is definitely possible in this year's Daytona 500. Up next up with the 22 car for Team Penske. This is once going to be driven by the defending NASCAR Cup champion Joey Logano, who's looking to win his second Daytona 500 after winning it 10 years ago in 2015. Joey is one of the best super speed racers in the field. He has won a lot of them over the course of the last few years, going to Atlanta, looking at Talladega, and Daytona as well. I think he will be a factor for the win, and I think he will have a great chance and opportunity to potentially win the Daytona 500 in 2025. Up next up with the 23 car for 2311 Racing. This one's going to be driven by Bubba Wallace. However, unlike the last couple years, Bubba Wallace will likely be in an unchartered car, as the 23 car is currently unchartered at this moment. Bubba Wallace also will have a new crew chief for 2025, as Charles Deneke will be the crew chief for Bubba throughout the season. I think Bubba is an underrated super speed racer. He's pretty good at these types of tracks, and I think he will be a favorite for the victory in 2025. If he can survive the big wreck, I think he will have a great chance to get it done. I think the 23 team will show the pace and speed to definitely get it done in the 2025 season. Up next up with the 24 car for Hendrick Motorsports. This is once going to be driven by William Byron. William Byron is looking to become the first driver to go back-to-back in the Daytona 500, I believe, since Sterling Marlin, and actually since Denny Hamlin in 2019 and 2020. William Byron has been one of the best super speed racers over the course of the last 3 to 4 years. He's won at Daytona twice, won at Atlanta twice, and been pretty good at Talladega, and just came up short at winning at Talladega earlier in 2024. I think Byron will be a factor for the victory. If the Hendrick cars can bring the pace and speed, I think he'll have a chance also to win the pole. I think he's won the Daytona 500 pole in the past. I do think he's got a good chance and opportunity to get both accomplishments done. We'll see what it can do in the 2025 Daytona 500 this upcoming season. Up next up with the 33 car for Richard Childress Racing. I think there's a chance that RCR is going to go ahead and enter a third car in the 2025 Daytona 500. The potential candidates I see getting behind a wheel are Austin Hill, Jesse Love, and potentially Chandler Smith. Chandler Smith has been linked over to RCR for the last couple of weeks. There's been talk that he could head to RCR in some sort of capacity. I could see him getting behind the wheel. I think Austin Hill is the most likely driver to get behind the wheel of this car, considering he's a really good super speedway racer. So if they do enter this car, Austin Hill has to be the favorite for this car for 2025. Up next up with the 34 car for Front Row Motorsports. There'll be a new driver behind the wheel of the number 34 car, as Todd Gillen will move from the 38 to the 34 car in 2025. And I believe Lubbs will be the sponsor for Todd for a majority of races in 2025. Todd will become the flagship driver of this team, and I certainly do think that Todd Gillen will be able to carry the reins and really help this program in 2025. And I think Todd, especially with how good he is at super speedways, I think he could win the pole for the 500, and I could see him definitely picking up his first career Daytona 500 win and his first ever NASCAR Cup Series win in the 2025 Daytona 500 this upcoming year. Up next up with the 35 car for 2311 Racing. This will be driven by Riley Herbst, who confirmed about a week or so ago he'll go full-time with 2311 in 2025 with Devin Restivo as the crew chief. Riley Herbst, I think, is a really good super speed racer. You look at his Xfinity numbers, he's shown a lot of potential, and in the Cup Series especially, he got a top 10 in the Daytona 500 in 2023. I think Herbst could be an underdog for the win, in all honesty. I think he's going to have the pace and speed to contend, and I think he will have a good chance and opportunity. Now, he will, of course, have to race his way in to the Daytona 500, but I think he's got a really good opportunity and a very strong possibility and chance to potentially win the Daytona 500 if he can make the show in the 2025 NASCAR season. Up next up with the 38 car for Front Row Motorsports. We haven't had official confirmation on the driver behind the wheel, but the most likely driver is going to be Zane Smith. Zane Smith's been heavily linked to this car, maybe as only a part-time entry for next year, but I think there's a good chance it will be full-time. Zane's been linked to be going back to this program for the 2025 season, and I think there's a good chance and possibility. And if he can do it, he's gotten a couple truck wins in the 38 truck in the past, so I think Zane could definitely be a factor for the Daytona 500 if he can survive and make the event as well. Up next up with the 41 car for the Haas factory team. This is a new reincarnated team that went away from Stewart Haas Racing. Of course, is officially shut down at this point. This car will be driven by Cole Custer. Now, Cole Custer has not been great at super speedways in the NASCAR Cup Series, but I could definitely see him showing some potential in speed in this year's Daytona 500. I think it will be a major factor to get it done. I think it will show some pretty decent speed if the Fords can come into play. RFK will be helping provide a lot of technical stuff for this. We'll see what Cole Custer can definitely do in the 2025 Daytona 500 this upcoming year. Up next up with the 42 car for Legacy Motor Club. This one once again be driven by John Hunter Nemechek, but he will have a new crew chief in 2025 with Travis Mack coming into play. I think John Hunter isn't a great super speed racer, if I'm going to be real and honest. Yes, he's shown potential in trucks, but hasn't really shown some stuff in Xfinity too, but hasn't been a factor in Cup. I don't think he's going to be a major factor, and I think he definitely will struggle a little bit in the 2025 Daytona 500 this year. Up next up with the 43 car for Legacy Motor Club. This will once again be driven by Eric Jones. Unlike John Hunter, I do think that Eric Jones has a really good chance to be a major factor. He's a really good super speed racer, won at Daytona in 2018. He's really good moving up to the top, making a 4-wide throughout a lot of super speed races in 2024. If Eric Jones doesn't get caught up in something, I think he will be a major factor and contender to win the 2025 Daytona 500 this year. We'll see if he can definitely get it done. Up next up with the 44 car for NY Racing. NY Racing is expected to return and run in 2025, especially at the Daytona 500. The question is, who is going to be the driver? I think it's going to be JJ Yeley or Matt DiBenedetto. JJ Yeley's driven for NY Racing many times. He did compete with them, I believe, earlier this year at Las Vegas and a couple other events. I do think you'll see this team officially show up and run a few select races in the 2025 season at Daytona. Up next up with the 45 car for 2311 Racing. This will once again be driven by Tyler Reddick. Tyler Reddick is looking to win his first ever Daytona 500, and while he does have a win at Talladega in Cup, I would not consider Tyler Reddick to be a major factor at super speedways. He's not as good at super speedways as some proclaim he is. I think he will be solid for sure if he can survive, but I don't know if he's going to be a major factor for the win. We know he's good at short tracks and other types of tracks. We'll see what he can do. We'll see if he can maybe get that Daytona 500 win, but I don't think he will be a major factor in the Daytona 500 in 2025. Up next up with the 47 car for Hayek Racing. This will be driven by Ricky Stenhouse Jr. JTG Doherty Racing, of course, will rebrand to Hayek Racing in 2025, with Gordon Smith taking over full operations of the program. Stenhouse is a winner in 2023 at the Daytona 500, and I think he will be a factor to definitely get it done if he can survive the big wrecks, and I think he will show the pace and speed and the potential to be up front. I think he will seriously be a contender in the 2025 Daytona 500. I think he's got a good chance to get it done. Up next up with the 48 car for Hendrick Motorsports. This will once again be driven by Alex Bowman. Alex Bowman came very close to winning the Daytona 500 in 2024, losing it in a photo finish against William Byron under caution. I think that Alex Bowman could be someone to watch out for. He's going to be someone who could win the pole for sure. He's won multiple Daytona 500 poles. I think he's definitely got a chance to do that. But I do think that if Alex Bowman could be up front at the end, I think we'll have a really great chance and opportunity to win the Daytona 500 this upcoming season. Up next up with the 50 car for Team Amervent. This team is expected to show up at a select number of races throughout 2025, including, I think, at the Daytona 500. So who is going to be the driver? My prediction right now is Jeb Burton. Jeb Burton drove for the team at Phoenix, and I think Jeb Burton has said he might do some more Cup Series events in 2025. So I think you'll see this team show up, and I think Jeb Burton most likely will be the driver behind the wheel in 2025. Up next, how about the 51 car for Rick Ware Racing? This is going to be the only charter entry for Rick Ware in 2025. The big question now we need to wonder is who is going to be the driver. To me, there's only two candidates right now, Corey LaJoie and Cody Ware. Those are the two names that have been heavily linked to this program for 2025. They kind of teased that it could have been Corey LaJoie, but we'll have to kind of wait and see who they do end up deciding. But I think there could be both these guys. Who knows at this point? Maybe it's split between these two guys. We don't know. But it'll be either Cody Ware or Corey LaJoie behind the wheel of this seat for the Daytona 500. Up next, how about the 54 car for Joe Gibbs Racing? This will once again be driven by Ty Gibbs. Ty Gibbs, not the best super speed racer at this point. I think Ty has shown potential in Xfinity, but not much in Cup. And I really don't think Ty Gibbs is going to be a major factor for the win if he can survive it. I just don't see him showing the pace and speed to go for the overall win. I think he's going to get his first career cup win at some point, but I don't think he will be a guy that can get it done at the 500. I think he's still got a little bit of time to wait before he could have a chance to win his first ever Daytona 500. He might have to wait till the 2026 year. Up next up with the 60 car for RFK Racing. This will be driven by Ryan Preece, who will join RFK Racing full-time in 2025. With RFK Racing speed, I expect Ryan Preece to be a factor. Probably his underdog factor, because I do think him being at super speedways, he has shown some potential, but also flipped upside down at super speedways, including at Daytona in 2023. I do think he will be one to watch out for, though, if he's still in contention at the end, but I do expect the 60 car to be pretty quick and show some great speed at the 500 in 2025. Up next, I have the 62 car for Spire Motorsports. I expect to see him to show up at the Daytona 500 in 2025. The question is what drivers could be behind the wheel. I think Anthony Alfredo is one of the drivers that might get behind the wheel of this seat for 2025, but I could also see Greg Biffle getting behind the wheel. Greg Biffle said he's interested in running the Daytona 500, and I think Spire Motorsports would be a very solid team to go with. Also, Austin Hill, if RCR doesn't decide to enter a third car, I could see him getting behind the wheel of this seat for the Daytona 500 in the 2025 year. Up next up with the 66 car for MBM Motorsports. This team confirmed about a couple weeks ago that they will enter the Daytona 500 in 2025. They will, of course, have to qualify their way in. The question is who's going to be the driver. I think it's going to be Timmy Hill. Timmy Hill's made a lot of starts for this team in the Daytona 500 in the past. I think that he will show up. We know they're confirmed to be showing up. I think Timmy Hill will be the confirmed driver for this team at the Daytona 500 in 2025. Up next up with the 6-7 car for 2311 Racing. This ride is up in the air currently at the moment. This was supposed to be Martin Truex Jr.'s seat for 2025 at Daytona, but Martin did confirm that 2311 will not be running him in the 500. Now, there's an outside chance they still could show up with the 67. I could see Eric Almirola or Corey Heim, maybe Carlos Kurt Busch, probably not though at this point. But I think that if they do show up, I think Eric Almirola will be a great driver to put behind the wheel. But I still think it's kind of unlikely that's going to happen. We're just going to have to wait and see if they decide to show up. But 2311 could still run a fourth car, but it's unknown if they are going to show up at the Daytona 500 with the fourth entry, but it will not be with Martin Truex Jr. Up next, I have a 71 car for Spire Motorsports. This will be driven by Michael McDowell, who will join this program in 2025. Michael McDowell, I think, could have a chance to really bring Spire into the mainstream when it comes to super speedways. He is one of the best super speed racers in the field, and I think he will be a major factor for sure to get it done in the 2025 Daytona 500 if he's there at the end of the event. He can make the right moves, can lead a ton of laps, led a lot of laps last year, won a ton of poles. We'll see what Michael McDowell can do. I think he will be a factor for sure in the 2025 Daytona 500. Up next, how about a 74 car for Spire Motorsports? There's been some speculation that Spire may run a fourth car in 2025. So this one's definitely a little bit of a question mark. The question is, if they do run a fourth car, who could get behind the wheel? Maybe Raja Karuf? Maybe Kaz Grala, perhaps, considering Kaz Grala has been rumored to potentially be going to Spire Motorsports in 2025 in the Truck Series. There's been rumors about that. Maybe Butterbean Queen, probably not at this point. But I think if they do enter a fourth car in the 500, I think it will likely be either Raja Karuf or Kaz Grala who get behind the wheel of the seat in 2025. Up next, I'm at a 77 car for Spire Motorsports. This will once again be driven by Carson Hocevar. Carson Hocevar is looking to win his first career NASCAR Cup Series event in the 2025 Daytona 500. Carson, of course, won the Rookie of the Year honors, and I do believe that Carson could be someone to watch out for, especially when it comes to his aggressiveness. But sometimes that aggressiveness can benefit you in a really, really big way, and I certainly do think that Carson could have an outside chance and opportunity. He'll once again work with Lou Lambert in 2025, and Carson will be looking to win his first Daytona 500 in 2025. We'll see if he can be a factor to definitely get that done. Up next, I'm at a 78 car for Live Fast Motorsports. I expect Live Fast to show up in the Daytona 500 with BJ McLeod behind the wheel. They're probably only going to run a few select super speedway events unless they decide to use it for legacy. I don't think that's going to happen, by the way, but I do believe that we will most likely see them show up for the Daytona 500 and other super speedway events in 2025. Up next, I have the 84 car for Legacy Motor Club. Right now, there's only two options, in my opinion, getting behind the wheel of this car. It's either going to be Jimmy Johnson or Martin Truex Jr. Mark Truex Jr. could drive for Legacy. They could be one for Sam Hunt Racing. Perhaps that could certainly be an option as well. But I certainly do think that you may see Jimmy Johnson or Mark Truex Jr. get behind a wheel. Mark Truex Jr., like I said, is expected to run the Daytona 500 2025, but it's also a little bit up in the air at this point because Legacy doesn't have a full technical alliance with JGR. But if we see Martin get behind the wheel and Joe gets prepared, I think it will eventually lead to Legacy becoming part of the JGR stuff. Up next, how about the 88 car for Trackhouse Racing? This will be driven by Shane Van Gisbergen, who will be competing his first Daytona 500 in 2025. Shane, pretty underrated super speedways, especially in the Xfinity Series. And remember at Daytona and Xfinity, he finished in 11th, and of course, he finished in the top 3 at Atlanta. If SVG can survive the carnage, I think he could be a factor for a top 10, which would be pretty impressive for him in his first Daytona 500. He will be learning a lot throughout the year. We'll go full-time with this program, and I think that Shane could be someone to watch out for. Imagine him win the Daytona 500. That would cause a lot of ruckus and a lot of controversy in a positive way, though, because Shane winning would be really cool to see. Up next, how about the 91 car for Trackhouse Racing? This course being the Project 91 car. I think there's kind of a hypothetical of this car showing up for the Daytona 500, but I could see it definitely happening. Maybe we see Connor Zilisch make his Cup Series debut after all in the Daytona 500. That could be a really crazy possibility. Or what about Pato O'Ward? That's another driver that's interested in running in the Cup Series. I know Mexico City's been brought up, but I do think he may see this car show up. I still think it's outside likelihood, but we'll see if they decide to bring this car in for the Daytona 500 in 2025. And finally, let's talk about the 99 car for Trackhouse. This course will be driven by Daniel Suarez. Now, Daniel Suarez, I do expect to be an underdog. He's been good at these types of tracks before, came up close to winning at Atlanta a couple times. Well, of course, he did win Atlanta earlier this year, and I think he will be a guy to watch out for in the Daytona 500 if he doesn't get caught up in a mess. We'll see what Daniel Suarez can do, and we'll see if he can be a factor in the 2025 Daytona 500 this upcoming year. So, that is going to be for the first official look at the 2025 Daytona 500 entry list. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications on, so if I win a video, it does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support me on Patreon as well. List description below that, and comment your thoughts below on today's episode. What are your thoughts about the video? Let me know it in the comments below. Tomorrow on the channel, we'll have a NASCAR news video discussing news over the course of the last couple days, and if any major news breaks up on teams like Junior Motorsports, Haley Deegan, Connor Zilisch, all those people, will talk about it live. Thursday is going to be the Thanksgiving Q&A on the channel. Friday will likely be a Junior Motorsports preview, and over the weekend I've got some videos on teams that could join the Cup Series in the future and other crazy videos that might be coming down the road as well. Got a lot of great content dropping, and we'll talk about Chandler Smith and all those people probably in the future as well. Got a lot of great content dropping that I cannot wait for you guys to check out. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.